SMS Chee Hong Tat.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank Mr. Sharul Taha and Associate Professor Razwana Begum for their support of the bill, and to all three members for their comments and suggestions. Members raised questions around three themes. One, adequacy of the NPF funds for various purposes. Two, ensuring proper accountability and governance for NPF-funded projects. And three, providing support for specific groups or programs through the NPF. I'll address them in turn. Associate Professor Razwana asked whether part of the funds in the NPF could be ring-fenced for continuing education and training, or CET. And Associate Professor James Lim asked how we will ensure that NPF does not dilute its focus on productivity. Mr. Sharul Taha asked if the 4 billion NPF top-up is adequate, and how can we balance the use of NPF funding across the three purposes of productivity enhancement, CET, and investment promotion. So as I explained in my opening speech, all three purposes are important, and they are complementary pillars of our economic growth strategy. Foreign multinational enterprises, or MNEs, which invest in Singapore, bring with them new technologies, market access, and business models which are internationally competitive. The net injection of such companies raises the quality and productivity of our local economy. Investments in CET build a skilled workforce, raising the overall productivity and competitiveness of our economy, and enable our workers to earn higher wages over time. With a better skilled workforce, Singapore also becomes more attractive to foreign investments. MNEs in Singapore benefit the wider ecosystem as they provide valuable training to our workers or form partnerships with our local companies, including small and medium enterprises. The NPF is not the only source of funding for productivity enhancements, CET, or investment promotion. The NPF is generally used to fund new initiatives on productivity and CET. Once these initiatives have proven to be effective, we will regularize them as mainstream programs, and they are then funded from the respective ministries' annual budgets or other sources. As for investment promotion, the Ministry of Trade and Industry will continue to tap on its annual budget for such activities. The reason we are expanding the NPF to cover investment promotion is to ensure that we have the additional firepower ready to attract key investments to Singapore in the event that the timing of these opportunities do not neatly match with existing funding mechanisms bound by the terms of government. So even as we expand the scope of supportable activities under the NPF to cover investment promotion, please let me assure members that the government will continue to set aside sufficient funding, be it in the NPF, ministries' annual budgets, or other funding sources, to support meritorious productivity enhancements, CET, and investment promotion. Mr. Sharul Taha asked about our ability to compete with other major jurisdictions for investment and what are the investments we are targeting. Our intention is not to try and outbid the major economies in terms of overall spending. With limited resources, we cannot afford to do that. In view of our constraints on land, labor, and increasingly carbon, we will have to play to our strengths and in areas where we have a competitive advantage. We cannot attract every project. Some are not compatible with Singapore's constraints and how we want to grow our economy. Our economic agencies have to carefully select the right projects that bring value and critical capabilities to Singapore. We will use the NPF funds to anchor quality investments from best-in-class companies in high-growth and high-value-added sectors, including advanced manufacturing, the green economy, and the digital economy. This includes attracting foreign MNEs to make new significant investments here, to create good jobs in Singapore, provide training to our workers, and partner with our local enterprises. All this will be supplemented by a robust cost-benefit analysis to ensure that the value these MNEs bring to Singapore outweighs the incentives given to them. Sir, I don't know whether I heard Associate Professor James Lim correctly earlier, but he seems to suggest that we may want to use the NPF to attract sports events, festivals, and concerts. Maybe he meant that in jest, because certainly that's not the plan. As I mentioned in my opening speech, we want to target quality investments from MNEs to anchor those that can add value to Singapore, create good jobs for Singaporeans. The broad phrasing in the bill is to give flexibility to be able to meet future needs and requirements, which can change over time. But the intent is clear, and I've stated that clearly in my speech during the second reading. So we will continue to ensure that there are sufficient resources available through the NPF and other funding sources to support investment promotion. At the same time, we will monitor the use of NPF funds across the three areas of productivity, CET, and investment promotion. It may not be meaningful to ring-fence the funds for any specific area, since all three are mutually reinforcing. Instead, we should preserve flexibility to accommodate fluctuations in spending from year to year, depending on factors such as what the business needs are, what opportunities are available, and what are the take-up rates of the various schemes. Let me now move on to the second broad theme. The safeguards were put in place to reduce the risk of abuse of NPF funds to ensure that projects achieve their intended outcomes. Associate Professor Razwana mentioned that she was pleased to see the bill will grant the Productivity Fund Administration Board, or PFAB, with the authority to inquire into and verify the accuracy of statements or information provided in applications for financing or incentive. I thank Associate Professor Razwana for her support in ensuring strong governance of the fund. The PFAB already has the authority to verify the accuracy of statements made by applicants for a grant from the PFAB. The intent of Clause 4 is to clarify that the powers to obtain information under Section 24 of the NPF Act apply not just to grants, but also to financing and incentives provided by the PFAB. So this is an enhancement to an existing power of the PFAB. Currently, NPF funds are channeled through government agencies to support their productivity or CET schemes, and the individual agencies are responsible for the implementation of these schemes. As part of PFAB's governance process, implementing agencies must carry out regular internal audits, and these audit reports will be submitted to the PFAB for review. Ratifications will be made if there are audit observations raised. The cases of fraud cited by Mr. Sharul Taha pertain to the Productivity and Innovation Credit, or PIC, scheme. Sir, I want to clarify that these were not funded by the NPF. The police investigated these cases and appropriate actions were taken against the perpetrators. We will adopt the same stringent approach for all funding sources to deter fraud and abuse cases. In terms of monitoring of outcomes, we will monitor the progress of schemes funded by NPF to see if they are on track to meeting their targets. For a particular scheme, we also review its outcomes and assess whether it has met targets. We will then decide whether the scheme should be closed, extended, or regularized as a steady-state program and funded from recurrent funding sources. Mr. Sharul Taha asks how we can ensure that NPF funds contribute to productivity improvements that could lower the cost of doing business in Singapore. The NPF will continue to fund existing and new schemes to support our businesses to do so. We will also continually review the effectiveness of these schemes to ensure that they remain relevant and can help our firms to drive real productivity gains. One such example is the iSprint scheme, which supported SMEs to automate their business functions through ICT. A study by the Ministry of Trade and Industry found that the median firm saw an increase in revenue of 3.1% after adopting solutions under the iSprint scheme. compared to firms that had not adopted the solutions. By and large, we have made good progress in driving productivity growth in Singapore. Since the NPF was set up in 2010, Singapore has met the labour productivity growth target set by the Economic Strategies Committee of 2 to 3% per annum over the next 10 years. At the aggregate level, our labour productivity growth rate over this period was 2.9%, which was higher than most advanced economies such as the US, Germany, Switzerland, and Japan over the same period. So Associate Professor James Lim's comment that our productivity growth, our labour productivity growth, has been anemic, if I heard him correctly, is actually factually incorrect and is not supported by evidence. So we will continue to monitor our overall productivity improvement, taking into account the combined effect of NPF funding, other government schemes, and the broader macroeconomic environment. Mr. Sharul Taha also asked for an update on the industry transformation maps, or ITMs. I understand that the Ministry of Trade and Industry will provide a fuller update on this. Sir, let me now move to the third area. Associate Professor James Lim, Mr. Sharul Taha, and Associate Professor Razwana gave several suggestions for NPF funds to be used to support specific programs like artificial intelligence or AI adoption, as well as for specific worker segments such as seniors and gig workers. I thank them for their suggestions. We will consider their suggestions carefully. Such efforts need not be and are not funded through the NPF alone. Various ministries and agencies contribute to these efforts through their budgets and other funding sources. For instance, Associate Professor Razwana, she suggested to allow firms to tap on NPF funds to engage in research and development. I wish to inform Associate Professor Razwana that firms can seek R&D funding through the $25 billion Research, Innovation and Enterprise 2025 budget. Mr. Sharul Taha and Associate Professor James Lim also suggested allowing firms to tap on NPF funds for AI adoption. In fact, government has already been investing in AI. We have developed a national AI strategy and made significant R&D investments to build up our strengths and capabilities in AI. We have also rolled out programs like AI Singapore to support enterprises to find suitable use cases and adopt AI. As AI will affect each industry differently, economic agencies will have to develop tailored AI strategies on a sectorial basis and make plans for how to upskill and reskill our workers as jobs are transformed. We are already funding these initiatives through ministries' annual budgets and other funds. If need be, we can also use NPF funds to supplement this funding. In short, if there are meritorious projects that are suitable for funding from the NPF, the PFAB will always welcome such proposals. Government agencies can submit them for funding consideration. Mr. Speaker, please allow me to conclude. The proposed amendments in this bill seek to expand the scope of the NPF Act to cover investment promotion. Through the expansion, we will continue to strengthen Singapore's proposition as a competitive and attractive place for business. But even as we continue to compete for foreign investments, we'll also keep our focus and continue investing in productivity and CET so that our local enterprises and our workers can reap the full benefits from our investment promotion efforts. As I mentioned earlier, these areas are mutually reinforcing. This is how we can build a virtuous cycle for our economy to thrive through investment promotion, where foreign MNEs want to set up in Singapore because they know we have strong local companies and a capable workforce, supported by strong tripartite partnerships. At the same time, our local enterprises and our workers benefit from the MNE's presence here through access to valuable partnership opportunities and good jobs. The three pillars of our strategy are complementary and will help to grow our economy in a sustainable manner for the benefit of Singapore and Singaporeans. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move.
Associate Professor James Lim.
Thanks, Speaker, for the opportunity to clarify. First, let me start off by pointing out that while I understand the original intent of the bill was along the lines, as SMS Chee mentioned, which is to promote both investment as well as productivity. My point when I gave those examples, which actually weren't entirely in jest, was that the language leaves this door open for such alternative expenditures. So I'm sure SMS Chee will agree that precision in the language of the bill is important, even as we wish to retain flexibility as much as possible. This will prevent the potential sort of abuses that one could imagine. Perhaps in my somewhat ludicrous examples. Now, on the issue of productivity, I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but there are two distinct measures of productivity. One is, as SMS Chee mentioned, labor productivity. But in fact, there's another measure which is more precise. It's called total factor productivity. It's productivity after you take into account all the observable factors of production. And here, unfortunately, I would take issue with the fact that the evidence is incorrect. In fact, I mentioned that in the 1960s through to the 1990s, evidence is abundant in this regard. The first evidence came from Alwyn Young, an economist that's currently at the LSE at the time at Chicago. It has been corroborated by other economists, Chan Tai-Sieh in 2002, using a different methodology, came up with the continued finding that productivity in Singapore remains low. More recently, MTI did have a publication in 2010 where they looked at the measure, and MTI tends to have the highest numbers, but other authors like Bhaskaran and Chiang in 2020 continued to find that Singapore has poor productivity performance even as recently as the 2010s. So unfortunately, I'm sure we can continue to disagree, but the point is that there is a slate of evidence, not just drawn from my own research, but from other academics, that demonstrates that Singapore's total factor productivity after you take into account observable factors of production remains, and I did use this word, anemic. And just one final point, Mr. Speaker, I do, in fact, despite my reservations, support the bill.
SMS Chee Hong Tat.
Mr. Speaker, first let me thank Associate Professor James Lim for supporting the bill. I wasn't sure whether he supported the bill, that's why I was careful in how I phrased it. But I thank him for that. Sir, let me address the point about the language. I mentioned it earlier in my response speech. The drafting of the bill to keep the language broad is to cater for future changes, because we can't predict what are the new industries that will emerge, what are the new activities that we will need to focus on, what are some of the new investments that we want to attract to Singapore. But the purpose of me in my second reading speech, making it clear what is the focus and the intent, is so that we provide clarity publicly and on record that this is what the NPF wants to focus on. So I hope that gives assurance to Associate Professor Lim. On the point about productivity, sir, I know there's a range of different reports with different figures, maybe because they made different assumptions. Like Professor Lim, I don't want to go into a lengthy debate here, but let me just say this, sir. If it's true that over the years, Singapore's total factor productivity or labor productivity has been very poor, I don't think it will be possible for Singapore, as a very open, small economy, to be able to attract investments, to be able to provide good jobs for our people, and for our workers to be able to see, over time, real wage increases. So I think these are proof points that matter most, I think, to Singapore, to our companies, and to our workers.
Any other clarifications for SMS Chee? The question is that the bill be now read a second time. As many as are of the opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
National Productivity Fund Amendment Bill.
Committee stage what day?
Now, sir, I beg to move that Parliament will immediately resolve itself into a committee on the bill.
The question is that Parliament will immediately resolve itself into a committee on the bill. As many as are of the opinion say aye. To the contrary say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is that clauses 1 to 6 stand part of the bill. As many as are of the opinion say aye. To the contrary say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Bill to be reported. SMS Chee Hong Tat.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to report that the bill has been considered in committee and agreed to without amendment.
Not reading what day? Sorry.
Now, sir, I beg to move that the bill be now read a third time.
The question is that the bill be now read a third time. As many as are of the opinion say aye. To the contrary say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
National Productivity Fund Amendment Bill.